Wargamers, we're starting to get a better idea of how Orks are going to play in 8th edition 40k, thanks in part to some leaks that we got earlier in the week, and then now a lot of friendly local game stores and Warhammer or Games Workshop stores have preview copies of the main rulebook and the indices that are being released in a week for people to go and look at. So getting a really clear idea of what the rules are going to be for every army out there, and today we're going to talk about Orks. Before we do that though, I want to say thanks for watching. If you like this video, if you like any of my other videos, go ahead, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and that way you won't miss any of my upcoming 8th edition videos. There's going to be tons to talk about in the upcoming weeks, so don't miss it. Overall, I think Orks got a nice rework here. It streamlines the... Overall, I think Orks got a nice rework here. It streamlines a lot of their gameplay. For the most part, it is a slight buff. There's a lot of things that seem like they're going to play really well in competitive matched play, but it's hard to tell just based on the points values because Orks are an army where a few points here or there can make a huge difference just because of the sheer model count. 1 point plus or minus on a single model adds up very quickly. And the way that Games Workshop has presented the rules for Orks and all other armies is extremely granular in terms of points. So it's not a super intuitive or easy metric to compare the basic bang for your buck with each Ork unit in particular in the index. So overall, I think a lot of the units look better on paper. With some vague notion of their points cost, but not, there's a way to split hairs there that can really make a big difference. But these are my first impressions on the Ork Codex. I think it's been improved. There are some things that they've streamlined, like Burnas, instead of having to roll your D3 for every single flamer in a Burna unit, you do it once for the entire unit. So they're trying to streamline it. They realize you're going to be playing with lots of models, and so they want you to be able to do that efficiently. But there are some things that they've done that in a way that makes it not feel quite as orky, which is disappointing. For example, the Ramshackle rule is now basically on a roll of a 6, you can reduce damage to a vehicle that was multiple wounds down to 1 wound, which is fine. That's good for the trucks. That's good for Orks. That works out really well, but it doesn't have the same flavor as the old Ramshackle rules. So there's a couple instances of that throughout the Codex, so be warned. Stepping back, looking at kind of the overarching rules, they have 2 special rules. They have Irrigo, which allows you to re-roll failed charges. This is pretty good, especially considering a lot of the changes to the Ork units have made them more close combat friendly. And there seems to be a clear effort on trying to get Orks into combat, which is good. The other main rule is Mob Rule, which we're familiar with, but now basically it says that the leadership for any Ork unit is the size of that unit. Alternatively, they can use the leadership of any Ork within 6 inches, whichever one's greater. So if you're using a smaller unit like bikes, perhaps you might want to use that 6-inch bubble leadership. Otherwise, if you're using a bunch of boys, having a leadership of 20 can be really important. All right. Now, so those are the 2 special rules. I think again they make a good backbone for making a large model count, close combat oriented army, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. The powers also kind of lend themselves to that. So there's 3 psychic powers, just like every psychic army has. The first is Edbanger, which is Warp Charge 6. The other 2 are Warp Charge 7, so keep that in mind. Warp Charge 6, basically you cast this power and you select the closest enemy model to the Psyker within 9 inches. You roll a die, and if the die is greater than that model's toughness, that model is removed from the game. So very straightforward, very simple, and it seems like it could have some situational benefit. In a lot of cases, I think the other powers would be better to cast, but In some places, like if you're going up against like an Elder Psyker or a low toughness character, something like that, that you're right next to, this could be a really quick and easy way to get rid of them. You don't have to deal with their toughness, or you don't have to deal with their wounds or their armor save or invulnerable save, anything like that. They're just gone. And I think this is a nice way to do that. Obviously, it's not going to work against anything with toughness greater than 5, because you have to beat their toughness. You can't match it, so anything toughness 6, you're not going to be able to get rid of with this. So that takes out a lot of the big units that you would normally want to target with something like this, but still, I think this has some utility. And of course, you're going to be able to pick your powers before you go into battle, so pick this when you can use it, and don't pick it when you can't, basically. The second psychic power is Warpath. It's Warp Charge 7, like I said, and it increases the attacks of an orc unit within 6 inches of the Psyker, which is awesome, especially considering some of the other close combat oriented things that we'll be talking about in a minute. You know, adding 1 to the attacks of any unit can make a big difference, but especially things like boys with high model count or bikers or anything that is going to be having multiple models in the unit. Adding 1 attack stacks up really quickly, so that's cool. And to jump is a teleport ability that can place a nearby orc unit 9 inches away from an enemy unit. And this is awesome, but it leaves the Weirdboy potentially exposed, the Psyker potentially exposed, because they have to be close to the unit and that they're casting it on, and so once that unit is gone, then if they are now the closest thing to the enemy, then that Weirdboy is going to get shot up real quick. So there's that. Green Tide is a rule that boys have, and it's pretty good. If there are more than 20 models, you get +1 attack. This synergizes well with the Choppa, which gives them +1 attack, and Warpath also gives them one attack. So boys can have 5 attacks each, which is a really good bang for your buck, or chop for your point, or whatever you want to call it. I think that's really awesome, and I can imagine this being an important part of orc armies going forward. Weirdboys are another unit that I'd want to highlight. They have this thing called Wog Energy, which allows them to gain +1 to their psychic test for every 10 orc models within 10 inches. Now, they still perils on a 12+. So if there's, you know, I don't know what the maximum number of orcs you could get within a 10-inch radius bubble, but let's say there's, you know, 40 orcs within that bubble. That orc boy, or that Weirdboy, is going to get +4 to his psychic test. So if he rolls an 8 or higher, he's going to perils, which means that's not good for him, right? That's not good for him, and it could potentially hurt all the units around him too, based on the new perils of the warp mechanism. So you got to be careful with that. It can be really good with Green Tide units, and can really boost him up, but you kind of want to regulate the number of units or number of models, because it's not a number of units, it's a number of models that are nearby the Weirdboy. So maybe you'll want to do a little bit of a conga line within that 10-inch bubble around the Weirdboy, and then have the majority of the Green Tide around the perimeter of that bubble. I think that works out well. I think that will work out well, because it not only protects the Weirdboy from shooting attacks, but it also protects your orcs and makes your Weirdboy a little bit more reliable. You probably want to have about 20 to 30 models in your bubble. 30 might be a little high. Probably like 20 models, just because your average 2d6 is going to be a 7, and that is enough to cast all the powers that you want to cast, but having, you know, just a little bit extra can help buffer that out, while still not totally going all in on the risk of perils. The Warboss, again, is something that we have to talk about. He has the Breaking Heads rule, which basically allows a orc unit within 3 inches to take D3 mortal wounds instead of failing their morale test. So if If you have a nearby orc unit, they fail their morale test, you can elect to use this special rule. You can break some heads and just take D3 mortal wounds instead. This can be huge, especially because orcs could be potentially really vulnerable to morale tests. But with this special rule and the mob rule special rule, I think they're actually going to be fairly resilient to morale tests in a lot of situations. What's going to hurt them is if they're outside of a Warboss's bubble, which is 3 inches, so not next to a Warboss, or if they're small units. So again, more of a pressure for larger orky units here, and that's fine. The jets are another thing that I want to point out, and they are super fast. This is the main thing I want to talk about with jets, is that they can move up to 60 inches, which is, you know, most of the board. So they're super quick. They can get anywhere where you want them to be, but they're still not very durable. And in fact, they're potentially a little bit less durable because of the way that flying is treated now. It's just a simple modifier. You're not snap shooting anymore or anything like that. So, yeah, so potentially a little bit more vulnerable than before. But I think all of these things together point to the codex or the index or the army list being focused around using Warbosses, Weirdboys, Pain Boys, bikes, boys, and jets, all in kind of this aggressive, very orky themed strategy of getting up close and personal very quickly. I think all of these units are going to be important parts of an orc army. I think you're going to want to have basically a Weirdboy with a bunch of boys. He can use his He can use the jump to jump the Weirdboys up, or excuse me, the boys up, right up to the enemy line right off the bat. Get a charge off soon after, you know, the next turn. And if that unit is large enough, it should still be large enough to make it into combat depending on the enemy and where you position them and stuff like that. So you could potentially get this big unit of boys right up to the enemy on turn 1, charge turn 2, and tie up the entire or the majority of their line right off the bat. And that can be supported by the Dakajet that can get up there right away and start, you know, picking off some other targets as well. In the meantime, you can use your bikes and your Warboss and your Pain Boy to come up and flank the sides and take care of them that way. So do a little bit of a pincer maneuver with boys being teleported and everyone else kind of riding their bikes up there. I almost forgot to talk about Morkanauts and Gorkanauts. We saw some things about these guys in the previews that Games Workshop released over the past few weeks, and yeah, they look like they could actually be really good. I think having the custom force field, giving nearby orcs 5+ invulnerable save is a huge boon to Green Tide armies, or really any army, and they actually have a fair amount of staying power and can do a fair amount of damage. So again, this is going to be, you know, where it kind of comes down to how many points it actually plays out to be. But overall, I think they're somewhat viable now. I think they actually could be a good part of a lot of armies and provide a strong backbone to units as they advance. So there's that. Like I said, let me know what you think in the comments below, and of course, happy wargaming.